Hey, welcome back to my Sketchbook Systems series. I'm Megan, I'm an aspiring children's illustrator, and with today's video, once again, I'll be taking you through an illustration from start to finish using multiple sketchbooks. Now, these multiple sketchbooks I love to use to separate different mindsets or different disciplines of art, and doing that really helps me to keep my process dynamic. I think, it's like I'm switching activities for different books. So for example, I like to use a smaller sketchbook like this A4 sketchbook to focus more on a design mindset. So in here go things like interior designs, fashion designs, and they're all what I use to build up the world in which my characters are going to live in. Whereas I like to use a bigger sketchbook like this A3 sketchbook to focus on more of an illustration mindset. So that's where I take my design ideas from the other book and I execute them into an actual tangible final illustration. So it's more refined rather than experimental. Now in terms of those two sketchbooks, that's just really the bare bones of my system. You have one small one for design, one big one for illustration. But as you'll see in this video, I tend to add in another sketchbook as and when I feel I need it. It's like, when you're on your laptop, you open a new tab, even though you've already got 10 open. Sometimes you just need that space and distance, for a new thought process to take place. And I think that's all right. I think having one sketchbook for one project, it can be a bit limiting. You tend to end up just going down this linear path, whereas when you give yourself the freedom to grab another sketchbook for another sort of way of thinking in your project, then you're freeing yourself up to be a bit more experimental, to be a bit more dynamic, and there's less pressure, which I think helps you to be more creative. Now, I should probably mention that what I'm using the sketchbook system for at the minute is for an original story concept surrounding a series of families, all of which have really strong shared interests that they enjoy together. And what I love to do with that project is turn that shared interest, that shared hobby, into a visual theme. And I let that visual theme flood into every area of my characters' lives. So you'll find that theme in their house, in their clothes, and even in their pets that they choose to have. So it's a really fun project, and I get to just be really exaggerative and maximalist in my designs. Something to mention about this illustration in particular is that there was quite a big gap between my last illustration I created for the project, the musical family, and this one, the Bohemian family. And because there was such a long gap, I think I was just itching to start again. I felt really refreshed from my break and really invigorated to start anew because it had been a while. And you'll see that that led me to be a bit more ambitious, and you'll see how that goes. So this story concept that I'm working on is my main project, as you can probably tell with all the videos on it. But in between working on this project, like I'm in that big gap that I had, I'll work on smaller projects. So for example, what I was working on then was card designs for Christmas, and it's a very different process for that. Luckily no perspective for that, at least not the ones I was doing. I was giving myself a break from doing all the grids and the room angles. It was like, let's just have a fun illustration, some sort of collage or something. But yeah, because I was like, phew, I haven't done perspective in a while, when I came back to it, I really came back to it and I doubled down on perspective. So yeah, if you're noticing a bit of a jump in the process of these illustrations, that's why. Is because I was so excited to get back to it, and also I guess had a point to prove. I was like, it's been a while, what have I forgotten how to do perspective? But no, I definitely I pushed through, as we'll see. So yeah, shall we jump into the sketchbooks, take a look? So weirdly, I think I started in a lined notebook for this. I wasn't expecting to start working on the picture book project again. I think I was just brain dumping a bunch of ideas I'd had lately in here when it started to take shape. At the top here, I'm just sketching out some different room angles. I think I was documenting all the angles I'd tried already for the book, and I wanted to think of new ones since I was challenging myself to do perspective in all manner of ways. I landed on this one where you can only see part of the back wall and all of the right wall in a weird sort of low angle. That made me problem solve and draw beanbags as their seat of choice. Once that was decided, I wondered what type of family would sit around on beanbags. They'd have to be pretty maverick and laid back to the max. I thought about hippies. I was probably also influenced by my own living room, because at the time my boyfriend and I were decorating our new house and decided on a bit of a 60s, 70s bohemian look because he loves plants and orange lamps and I love anything funky and retro. So it seemed like a good idea and one that was mulling around in my brain for a while. So I was able to quite quickly get down this design without even consulting our good friend Pinterest. It's kind of an exaggerated idea of what we wanted to do, and even weaves in my dream of owning a massive rug. Those things are expensive, you know. I think I must have spent like 2 months of my life trying to find an affordable yet well produced and cool rug. To no avail. We were looking for more of a super graphic type design, to be fair, but this sort of Turkish style rug would look quite chic too, especially for this bohemian family. I had so much fun designing the rug. I just started in the centre with a random shape and then kind of riffed off of that all the way to the edges. There's something rhythmic and instinctual about pattern design that I really love. It was nice not to be worrying about if my drawing looked realistic and to only be concerned about the pleasing balance of shapes in the rug. I put a pin in that background design for now and got to work in my actual sketchbook on some fashion designs. This is where the theme really beds in for me, as I chose flowy fabrics, floral motifs and a tomboyish edge for these looks. I really liked playing with the running themes patchwork for their outfits. There's always something that brings my family's outfits together. Sometimes it's more subtle, like complementary patterns, and other times it's more in your face and makes them look like they all went out of their way to buy matching outfits. I'm not sure how many families would willingly do that, but I think these bohemians look pretty good. And there's something to be said about sustainability with these outfits. I like to think that they made them themselves with fabric scraps that they have around the house. Speaking of which, down here I was experimenting with fabric designs in my chosen colour scheme, really pushing the colours as far as they'd go with new combinations. I really enjoyed making textile designs in the musical family process, so I wanted to repeat it here. I don't think I've mentioned before, but when I was younger I really wanted to be a fashion designer. I steered away from it when choosing a uni course, since at the time I felt really unconfident in my ability to draw people. But now I take whatever opportunity I can to create fashion or textile designs. That's another reason why I'm really pushing to improve my anatomy skills. It's of course important for children's illustration as well as fashion design. I think the good thing about illustration as a course or even just as a practice is that it's so far-reaching. I don't feel like I've boxed myself in by taking that course or by pursuing that career. I really enjoy expressing my interest in the other arts such as fashion design or interior design through my illustration, and I think it might even strengthen it by adding more disciplines in, adding a unique voice to my artwork. That's why it's important to look for inspiration outside of illustration for your projects. You never know what might spark joy and create something unexpected. Over here I started creating another room layout thumbnail like I did in my notebook, but I stopped partway, feeling like I was redoing it for kind of no reason. I was actually really happy with my initial thumbnail. I think I was just trying to make it more presentable, which goes against my philosophy for this small book, which is that it isn't some perfect presentation of my ideas for someone else to view, despite you viewing it this very second of course, but rather a reference for me to come back to during my drawing process, a useful guide of where I want to head with it. So the rest of this page just became a paint tester page whilst I created the final outcome. Now let's take a gander at this full-scale line art. You may tell I had some difficulty with this one. Remember me saying how ambitious it was since it had been a while? I'd rather not say overly ambitious, As you could tell by the very existence of this video, I completed it, didn't I? But with much effort, that's for sure. The beanbags unexpectedly were the main villains of this story. Who knew drawing vague sphere-like shapes in perspective would be so difficult? But I realised at this point it was my first time drawing something without a single straight line in it. You really can't rely on a grid here, and you have to work from instinct. Again, it was a case of imagining it was a box instead. Ah, if only it was a box. And then using trial and error to keep working it almost like clay till it was just right. The second villain, the evil sidekick as you might say, was the rug. Yes, that rug I'd been dreaming about turned out to be quite the nightmare. This was definitely the biggest chunk of time for this illustration, getting all those details in perspective. I think what threw me off was that I had designed such intricate details, but then you could barely see any of them. One, because of the outsized elements that were right at the front, and two, because there were so many hidden shapes under where the furniture would have been. So what I think I should have done in retrospect was tackle this line art in layers. Starting with one that just had the rug on it so I could see where all the details were and sort of work from one shape to another instead of having to imagine them. And then a second one with just the beanbags. But yeah, it was quite hard imagining where one shape would be that would lead on to another that was hidden under the furniture. But we made it in the end, and I think it was truly worth it. I was doubly happy with the piece after working so hard for it. There's times when I've doubted myself as an artist, feeling that I don't have as much technical ability as others. But working on this personal project has really boosted my confidence. There's been many moments of near giving up, but I've pushed through and created the sort of illustrations that I like to see, not just the sort that's personally easy for me to make. Once I was finally content with the line art, I took it over to my best A3 sketchbook to get started on my favourite stage, the colour application. Especially with such an intricate design this time, I really enjoyed methodically painting the shapes with watercolour. And it was a nice contrast to paint the large flamps, the infamous beanbags, as there was so much space to focus on getting smooth before toning it up with a coloured pencil. It did occur to me upon finishing that these kind of look like baked beans. You just can't unsee it once you've thought about that, can you? And then we've got the accessories, the hanging houseplants of my dreams, and a classic monstera in the corner. I really like the texture of that, and it took a few layers to get it right. We have a tiled terracotta bookshelf on the wall, which I suppose is a nod to modernism in this mostly retro room. I made up an alphabet for the book edges for some reason. I guess I didn't want to come up with book titles or have it distract from the actual text that would be on the page. Anyway, it kind of ended up looking like Korean or something to me, so that's a bit of a fun detail. I must admit, drawing wood texture is my favourite thing to do in an illustration. It's just so therapeutic and adds detail without overwhelming a piece. Let's hop back to the little book and say hello to the characters, shall we? I tried some tricky positions for these ones, sat cross-legged against a wall and kneeled down. You may be able to tell at this point in the project that I'd started taking anatomy seriously. Up until this point, I only drew people when it came to creating a specific illustration, like this. But I had now started practicing drill style outside of my finished projects. I started doing daily practice with a website called Line of Action, which is an online life drawing tool which allows you to practice drawing poses in short bursts, challenging your observational skills. I think this gave me the boldness to go for more challenging poses in this one. Perhaps ill-advised, but I tried my best. For this family, I went with two mums and a little girl who have a pet dog, an Irish setter. I took my time with the dog, and I think even when I thought it was finished, I refined it again. I'm happy with the glint in his eye. I think it makes all the difference. You can see here I also drew some accessories for the room. Sometimes I draw those separately from the main line art, just so I can ensure a level of detail I'm happy with. And now onto the final versions in the A3 sketchbook. I think this is the first time I've drawn the characters mid-conversation, so maybe I could do with practicing drawing teeth again. Aside from that, I really enjoyed drawing these characters, especially because I got to make the most out of working multimedia here. I started with watercolour, varying the tones with different levels of water mixed in, sometimes mudging the blue just a little with grey to give different denim effects. I think it can be all too easy to accidentally make denim way too bright of a blue, so I think I did pretty well balancing that and testing out different tones. I decided that for this mum, her patchwork would be denim but with little pops of colour through embroidery, as if she'd upcycled it herself. I stuck with natural motifs of flowers and bugs, since I wanted to demonstrate that they're really in tune with the earth. That's the whole thing. For the other mum, I chose more of a traditional patchwork design with colourful fabric swatches. Getting hands-on with patterns is my favourite part of this process. For their little girl, it's another fabric patchwork, but this time with just block colours. I had fun working with complementary colours here. Since most of the background is tones of orange, I thought adding blue in would make for a nice deviation. And I played around with the complementary colour thing by giving this mum ginger hair to pop against her blue dungarees. I really enjoyed getting back to my roots of using just coloured pencil for the dog. I used to draw only in coloured pencil, using it for quite ambitious tonal and textural illustrations, but in recent years I've gone down more of a multimedia route. Both, I guess, for visual interest, but also for convenience. It's a lot faster to lay down colour with a watercolour wash than it is to use pencils to fill in everything. Saves me on buying Prismacolors too. My first set is down to nubs. I'd rather not go in for a third one if I can help it. As you can see, I redid the mum's face here, as I kind of messed it up initially with the shading and accidentally scuffed up the paper a bit. I actually did quite a lot of corrections in post with these characters, changing their facial features and dulling down the shine of their hair, for example. I'm happy with the clothes themselves, but I think the people needed a bit more work, and so that's why it's useful taking analogue work digitally at the end. So here you can see what I mean in the final assembled illustration. Everything's a little more refined, and I'm happy with how connected this family looks. I think a lot of the illustrations that I've done before have a tendency to have the characters doing a shared activity, yes, but not really interacting that much whilst doing it, perhaps? But here, the characters are facing each other, having a conversation. I also think the layout of the room helps with that connectivity as well. They're very much in a circle, or at least a triangle. I've heard that a round table is much more proactive for meetings, or much more chatty at dinner parties, as it allows everyone to feel on a level playing field, and therefore open up more. I suppose I hadn't really thought about the psychology of the rooms I was designing until this point, but now that I have, maybe it's an interesting idea to ponder on for future designs. Overall, I think this is one of my favourite illustrations. It's up there with the musical family for me. It took a long time to get here, but I think the rug was worth it. It really ties everything together and gives it a homely look. And there we are, another themed family that's gone through my sketchbook system. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about my process and getting a glimpse into my sketchbooks. If you'd like to see more, please do subscribe and stay tuned for the next instalment. Thanks, bye!